Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are on our gorgeous planet. Before we begin, thank you for taking the time to participate in this webinar. This one is very close to my own heart. And so before we begin, we have a guideline for engagement that I'd like to read out, which is in the chat box at the moment, but I'm simply going to read it out. This will be part of the format of what we do. Welcome to this ASI community gathering. We're glad that you're here. These community webinars are here to support our members and mission of spiritual integrity. We ask participants to stay connected, accountable, sensitive, and skillful when engaging today. We ask that you agree to create and maintain safe space for learning and growth. To that end, we will refrain from marketing or self-aggrandizing while avoiding inflammatory or deliberately destructive comments. If you want to recommend a relevant and appropriate resource to attendees, please do so in the chat box. The ASI will remove participants who engage in harmful activity after one warning. Thank you so much for creating this community with us, showing up with presence, attunement, and self-awareness. So these are our rules of engagement, and thank you for listening. In order to introduce our important topic today, I'd like just to take a minute to talk about the bigger picture of the ASI. As some of us might know, if we're involved in kind of social change and maybe ecological preservation or any other social movement in order to make the world last a little bit longer than the way we're burning it up right now, and in order to shift humanity into a more evolved state of being. These movements that are involved in social change, the ASI, I feel, is part of a movement also to create a new model. It's not that we look at the old model in order to judge it, to criticize it, to fix it. It's not what we do at all with our attention. But what we're doing is trying to create a model with ongoing community consultation, a model that evolves, that is not static, that is less hierarchical and more we than me or us, going into a we space. And can spiritual teaching function with respect, accountability, integrity, ethics, and still hold teachings and guidelines that will help people on their spiritual journey, but couched in a framework of where there is greater awareness of the human element that we all share. And the human element involves planetary awareness. It involves a wider spread of values. So the ASI, I just noticed from emails popping in every now and then, it's like, gosh, it's not clear to the general public what we're doing. And maybe it's because we're doing something that's not here already. And that's what personally excites me so much, is listening to see what wants to happen next towards a more evolved, mature version of spiritual leadership. And when we're doing something new, we screw up all the time. That's how we learn and grow. And so that's built into it. How do we engage and course correct? Engage and course correct. They very often go hand in hand, I've found. So as we create this new model, and it's an evolving model, so it's not going to be created and there it is. Like, we're doing it. This is the new model. Having this conversation today is the new model. And I suppose one value that rings true to me is that inner change within myself manifests as outer change in how I behave and show up in the world. And if I want to, personally speaking, if I want to do something differently on the outside world in my behavior, it will either come from judgment or, self-aggrandizement, or it'll come from a seed of inner change within me. And my commitment is to go within, to let outer change always be informed by an inner shift. And I think for authentic humility, for values that are across all spiritual disciplines are given some space and given high regard, you know, treating others as you'd like to be treated, being a very simple one, you know, being fully human and fully divine, and how we're both respected in yourself and therefore in others. When we approach things in this way, we are entering into a we space. And we demands that the me part, in whatever way we interpret that to be, that the me part aligns with the divine part. And so to do that, we have to acknowledge that regardless of our spiritual attainment, we are human beings with human personalities, limitations, drives, and needs. And how do we bring that in with love and not see it as not spiritual? How do we bring it in and give it time and space, like self-care for our humanness? Can there be love and compassion for that? Because love and compassion on the inside manifests as love and compassion towards everybody on the outside. So the tenet we're exploring is that one today, acknowledging that regardless of our spiritual attainment, we are human beings with human personalities, limitations, drives, and needs. And so each person here has a human aspect. This is where we meet. We're meeting through our humanness today. And how do we relate to that humanness? And if we are a spiritual leader or a spiritual student or simply interested in the topic, what's our relationship with that human being? The one that is ourselves. So the first question around the key discussion points that was in the blurb on our website was, does authentically expressing one's humanness reduce or enhance one's efficacy as a spiritual teacher? So this is popcorn style. Pop up your hand whenever you'd like to engage, but let's see what the thoughts are as a community right now. Let's see. Any thoughts on, does authentically expressing your humanness reduce or enhance your efficacy as a spiritual leader? Hi, Brianna.
Hello. My first thoughts are, well, first of all, thank you for having this space, and it's nice to be here with all of you. Nice to see your faces. My first thoughts are that when I'm engaging with a teacher that lets their humanity be known and does that, what you said, engage and then course correct rather than attaining for perfection, for me, I feel more connected to that person because they're dealing with a lot of the same desires and blunders that I am. And so I'm like, well, that person has walked where I'm walking and therefore can help me navigate these spaces. And then it also gives me an opportunity, like if I have judgment that comes up for myself, like looking at that person in that position and like, oh, well, how does this person, present themselves as like knowing all of this while also making maybe really big mistakes. And then it gives me an opportunity to recognize that judgment is being held here and gives me an opportunity to look at myself and where I'm still judging not just that person, but like the whole column of that kind of mistake inside myself as well as in humanity in general. So I actually really appreciate it when someone can bring that humility forward. Thanks.
Super, Brianna. Thank you. Thank you. I towards the end of last year, I asked some young people, what do you want in a spiritual teacher? And hopefully these videos will become some kind of montage to kind of tell us this is what the kids are asking of us, the 20-year-olds, this is what they're asking of us. And they all said, without watching each other's, they all said, I want somebody who's just normal, who's just human. Of course, I'm going to them because of their wisdom, but if they can't, exactly what Brianna just said, if they can't show me how they're still human, then there's no meeting point for me to them, and I will trust them more if they're more authentically human and honest about themselves. So thank you for Brianna. I'm finding that is so eloquent among younger people, and me being part of the old stodgy culture, like we weren't trained that way. So it's a new thing for us to orient and to learn how to do that. Thank you. Annie, your hand was up. Do you want to?
I just would sort of add to what Brianna said. Yes, I mean, I think there's right now in particular, it's so difficult to trust, and truth is at a premium. And I think when with that transparency, then it's easier for me to trust, and I assume so either way. And so, yeah, I think that's really an important element. The only thing I would caution myself or anyone working with me or teaching me against is working their own stuff in the process, being really clear about their purpose for transparency. That's, and I think that's one of the reasons for the old guidelines that you're talking about was sort of keep things clean. Well, okay, fine. I think you can keep them clean if you're conscientious about your intentions in sharing. So.
Yes, and a deeper self-awareness too, so that people know what's going on with them and own it. Thank you, Annie. Mahadevi.
Hello, thank you. So I have something that kind of goes with the two of those. I guess it's a little bit in between, and I found it personal to me, and something that's dear to my heart is when it comes to the navigating into a spiritual teacher, there's also a level of discernment that I've found that's necessary to know if the teacher is telling a story about themselves because it is a part of their process, or if the storytelling is the medicine. Does that make sense? Like, if the storytelling is the transformation that's going to create the light, or if it's actually kind of just spinning in a circle. So I found for myself that has created a little bit of confusion because I wasn't quite healthy in my feeling body. So I wasn't quite able to feel truth yet. So it created some confusion in the mind space.
Yeah. Does anybody want to pick up what Mahadevi said? Okay. Thank you, Mahadevi. Yeah, I have to think about it. That's really interesting. Thank you for bringing it up. And we can't really know the core intention of your teacher. Only your teacher is going to know the authentic intention behind delivering something. So in a way, it is for you to navigate. I haven't really thought about this too much, but that's my first response. It feels like you have to navigate it yourself until you can find a place of resonance within yourself of, does this feel? But our body is a great indicator of that. How does it feel in our body? That's something that I used to use a lot. It's like, does that feel like, something's moving and I'm going to process this for myself? Or like, actually, this is off. There's a particular kind of jolt inside when something is out of alignment. And if you can feel that, that's an indicator that I used to use.
Thank you. Thank you.
Eliza.
Hi. An aspect of why this feels important that hasn't come up yet may be that it's enhancing in that it acknowledging one's humanness eliminates the false ideal that the humanness is no longer present in beings of attainment, which, yeah, can feel like it brings all kinds of problems for the students potentially, but for the teachers especially.
Yep. Great point. Great point. And I want to circle that back to that, Eliza, when we talk about can certain levels of spiritual attainment limit the awareness of our human needs and limitations, kind of weaves into that a bit. It's a really good point. Thank you. Jenny.
Hello, grateful to be here. And for months, if not years, I've kind of wondered if this kind of thing existed and found you guys. And I'm so grateful for the work being done, even if it's just conversations to be having around it. Because I heard you say it, Jackie, the work within is reflected outward. And when we see behaviors and we know these things, and in the name of spirituality and desire not to judge, and certainly not to gossip, these infarctions continue in secrecy and lack of transparency. And I don't have any answers. I'm not pretending to know, but just to have a place of people who have noticed these discrepancies between talking the talk and walking the walk, or to use that tired old adage. I just have gratitude and appreciation.
Yeah. And there is a thin line, because I learn a lot from mistakes that have been made. Sorry, I seem to be talking about myself a lot right now, but sorry. I've learned a lot about, mistakes that have been made, and have to walk that thin line of like, okay, there's no part of my beingness here that I want to let judge, but can I learn? Can I learn so that we can see what might have been a preventative measure to stop bad behavior happening? What was absent in the culture? And that's really what we're trying to do. Can we create a culture so that the a more authentic and accountable and integrity-filled behavior can morph out of that? Yeah, so it's a subtle thing, isn't it?
But to answer the question posted, being able to express humanity and the situations that we find ourselves in is the way it becomes the check, in a way. And although, yes, there are perhaps a need for teachers to kind of hang in the absolutes and the truth and the love, for the beginners, perhaps. But as understanding deepens and matures, it's all one thing. There is no separation between the human aspect and the spiritual being aspect. So the beauty of it is in the combo,
Yeah. And skills are required to be able to hold both as you're teaching. And if we haven't had any training around that, like we just don't know that we don't know. We don't know that we're not skillful, Yeah. Rick, let's just take these three and then move on to the next one, because there's all of these questions kind of are just different angles on the same thing. And I think it'll give everybody an opportunity to participate. Rick.
One thing I've noticed in myself and in spiritual teachers is, and I think this is true of people in general, is that if you put on airs, if you try to portray yourself as being something you're not, it creates a dichotomy or a schism or a disconnect within yourself, which is weakening and which only grows the more you persist in trying to do that, and which has led to the downfall of many teachers. Sometimes very publicly and sometimes more privately in terms of their just going off the rails in terms of the clarity and sanity of their behavior and their teaching. So in any case, I think the essential point there is that it behooves the teacher himself to try to be authentic and to not, be put on airs or a facade, because it will undermine his or her personal evolution and also his functionality or efficacy as a teacher.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Rick. Brianna.
Thanks for taking my comment again. I really like something that you said, Jack, about what are the ways that we culturally create or can have the power to shift the environment in which somebody is able to be transparent and authentic. And that is where it's up to all of us, right? It's like, how do we take personal responsibility for a culture in which accountability and transparency are generally not welcome? And I would say that historically, shame has been used as a way to control and to like keep people safe, even in the way that we parent frequently, using shame as a way to like keep people in what we think is like this narrow scope of okayness. And if we're all operating under this fear of being called out or being shamed or being ostracized, then it doesn't leave any space to feel safe. And it turns into like a very brave act to even be authentic about our mistakes and be transparent about those things. So I think the work resides in all of us to have compassion and accept each other's humanity, even people that maybe have a platform or have done more work, but allowing those people the grace to also make mistakes is where we can all participate in making something new.
Yep, totally aligning with you there. Thank you. Scott.
Hi, everybody. I just found my way to ASI recently and so happy you guys are doing what you're doing. And the topic last month on cults was great. And this one this month is like near and dear to my heart. So appreciate that. Two comments. One, commenting on what Mahadevi said, I think the issue around authenticity is one of discernment and integrity. And the question for me behind that is, who is this of service to? Is it of service to the ego of the teacher, or is it of service to the students? So I think that's an important way to look at it. And the other is just a personal note. A teacher I've been studying with the last many years is very real and very human and very different from the mega gurus I've studied with in the past. And the man has a lot of integrity. I trust him. And I remember just one day, I was standing in the hall with him and students were coming and going. And I noticed him checking out a woman. And I said to him, "Oh, so you're checking out some of the chicks, huh?" And he went, "Yeah, she's really beautiful, isn't she?" And, I knew that he wasn't going to act on it because I know him and I know his past, but that he was honest with me and didn't cover that up. I just made me trust him so much more and feel so much closer to him because he was real. So that stuck with me. And he consistently has done that through time, is just being very real. And at the same time has done the work on himself to know, what's appropriate and what's in integrity and what isn't.
Beautiful, Scott. Honesty, huh?
Yeah.
Honesty and self-awareness,
Yes, both.
Both. Yeah. Around our humanness, which is not
Yes.
at odds with the spiritual wisdom, and they're not at odds with each other, but I think the schism that Rick was talking about is as if the divine wisdom, negates and it has more value than the personal wisdom. Then off we go then. You see this imbalance of our wholeness. There's no integration of all parts of us. Yeah.
Real quick anecdote here that I just want to throw in that I just remembered. I was in a hall one time with a couple hundred people with Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, and I was off on the side, and a woman standing near me took a photo of him as he was drinking a cup of water. that someone had handed him, and he started yelling at her. And afterwards, I think he felt a little ashamed of himself for how strong. I mean, she was shocked. But as he left the hall, I was still standing right there. He stopped in front of her and said, "Any photo taken of me should inspire people, and it's not going to inspire people to see me drinking a glass of water. So you shouldn't take such photos." And that seems to me now, in retrospect, it seems so inauthentic. And there was a huge dichotomy between his public persona and his private life, which I think this little anecdote is symptomatic of.
Yep. Yeah. Thank you, Rick. Scott, you were going to come in with a comment there.
I will, but I'll save it for later. Thank you.
Okay, let's go on to the next, another discussion point and see where we get. Can certain levels of spiritual attainment limit the awareness of our human needs and limitations?
Jack, may I say something first?
Of course, please.
Just something quick. If we want a role model for just being open about your humanness, being more effective than the opposite, Ram Dass is probably a prime example. He was so beloved and he reached so many people. And one of the reasons for that is he very early on dropped the Baba and just became Ram Dass and would talk about his weirdness and his foibles and tell personal stories. He didn't pretend to be perfect. And that's, in my experience of interviewing people, that's the thing that most people talk about the most, about their fondness for him.
And a counter argument is I suppose, like, if we're saying, yeah, I know. Okay, myself and Phil know each other very
There's
well.
always a counter argument.
There is.
Among us humans.
Is like, to set somebody up as a role model is part of the old model.
Well,
you know,
maybe.
because where was his humanness, like, that he didn't see? And we do have, like, the parts of our humanness that we haven't yet explored, that we have yet to evolve, which won't get wrapped up when we're dead at all. There's always stuff if we're
Well,
engaging in developing
don't
relationships.
call him a model, then call him an example.
Yeah, maybe so. But you know, there's. It's funny. I had a conversation exactly about that man with some friends, and one of them is here. The other day around. No, there was a lot there that didn't get.
Of course.
Didn't get unraveled at all, even you know, until his death. So,
Well, of course.
like, yeah. So you know, that hierarchical old model, it doesn't allow for a we. And what would be a we version of that? You know, having examples, but always leaving a caveat for. And yet there will have been hidden stuff in that person's personality that we never knew about.
Part of the
they passed
humanness.
on. Yeah, part of the humanness, and really knowing that that's held by all of us, rather than a way to pull somebody down, or the absence of it is pushing somebody out. It's always there, whether it's denied or not. It's always there. And can we love it and include it and embody it? That's kind of where I'm thinking. Arden?
Thank you for having this. This last question, can certain levels of spiritual attainment limit the awareness of our human needs and limitations? I kind of had the same response to both questions a little bit. And that is because, okay, and I'm thinking in terms of acceptance rather than attainment. And if I apply that same standard to the first question, also, does authentically accepting my humanity reduce or enhance my efficacy? It changes the connotation just enough that I'm more comfortable in everything I do with my clients. So it's not just authentically expressing my humanness, it's accepting my humanness, and then it's easier to know from a place of self-acceptance how I might be affecting another person. I can watch because I'm in acceptance, and then I'm more sensitive to whether or not I've assumed a position of some sort of power and authority that I didn't intend to, or if they're doing that to me and I can pay attention, oh, they're putting me somewhere I didn't intend to go in how they're responding to me, changing that power, some sort of power dynamic, right? So if I'm in acceptance and I'm just kind of feeling okay about everything, I'm tuned into those moments. And I do think it comes down to those moments of self-awareness and also paying attention to the other. So that's kind of my answer, my thoughts on both of those questions. And no, it doesn't limit our awareness. In my experience, I'm accepting it, my human needs and limitations. I'm not cut off from them. Anyway, those are my thoughts. Make sense?
Yeah,
I seldom have to explain such a subtle thing, so I'm not sure if I'm saying it in the right ways. Anyway.
You nailed it, Arden. Thank you. And it's a great tip for all of us. It's like acceptance of our humanness allows this embodiment, this unfolding to move forward. And like authentic acceptance, which is what I'm hearing you're talking about, authentic, not just a cerebral. But
right. No, certain feeling that. And then when it comes to, I think that's where the power, and that's why being a teacher becomes such what would you, it's fraught. Fraught is the word, the idea of being a teacher. And so if we're in acceptance, we're much less likely, I think, I'm speaking from my own experience, to play into any kind of power differential around the idea of teacher, spiritual teacher. Okay.
Yeah, super. Thank you. Yeah. Thea.
Hey there. Thank you so much for holding this discussion. I'm coming at the question with a slightly different word in place. The question is, can certain levels of spiritual attainment limit the awareness of our human needs and limitations? And I would like to propose the word phase. Can certain phases of spiritual attainment limit the awareness of our human needs and limitations? Because I do believe that I have seen that. So I am a Muslim, and we have words for what happens when you're in what's called fana. When you're in fana, you are disappeared into God, and often your business and social relationships and all, you're out there. And it's in fact one of the important aspects of spiritual community. There's even words for like a person who's God crazy and drunk, they're majdoub, so you could say, okay, he's a little majdoub right now. And other people in the community shelter them. And a fana can last a day, or a fana can last months. I mean, usually it's not more than a year, but it's possible if it's a really huge fana. And in that state of being in fana and even downright majdoub, you could give exquisite teachings, transmissions from a beautiful place, while not knowing your ass from your elbow. And then comes the baka, where all of that needs to come down into the humanity. And it's usually more awkward and sort of irritable as you suddenly discover that your habit for eating ice cream is actually maybe not really congruent with what's coming through. And so we know it's okay, he's in a baka phase. He is more aware, or she is more aware, and it's a different recognition of what we're going through, and it's periodic It's not the higher you are, we fana and then we baka. So that's a comment I wanted to bring in.
Wonderful. And I think this is where, you know, especially, you know, wisdom traditions that have stood the test of time have these gems, structures, language, codes of behavior, understanding. And then when we look at like what can happen without that support of lineage of some shape or form. And if we have a young student who's just trying to navigate, and of course, oh my God, they're beyond. This is just what God does, because it doesn't look very human. So this is God. And so the hierarchy, the power thing kicks in. And then of course, if there's attachment to the attention that the teacher gets, it can get very toxic. But I love the wisdom that comes from traditions. And I have no idea how we bring the wisdom of, I see somebody as well for said in Hindi circles, Nirvikalpa is the equivalent for that stage of what I personally call it losing functionality in the regular world, you know, limiting your functionality is limited, your perception is blocked. And many people teach from that place. Many people get attached to it and they stay there and they see it as like an attainment, and grasping happens and they don't move out of it, and there's no environment to protect them from it, you know? And I don't know how all of that can overlap, and so that the ancient traditions can inform, the healthy parts of the ancient traditions can inform contemporary spirituality. That's yet to come. Great point, thank you. Jerry.
Well, first, I'm deeply touched and moved by what Thea has just said. For one thing, because it's such a loving teaching. It doesn't say, oh, this person has gone off and is in the wrong direction and needs to straighten up and come back this way and that way. No, it's all perfect. These are natural stages, natural steps. And the thing that came to mind when you were talking about levels of spiritual development is we don't see enough of the teaching that, you know, I'll use, you know, my familiar terminology from Vedanta, Brahman includes everything. Brahman accepts everything and rejects nothing. And also, Brahman is ever expanding. This is paradoxical. You know, we quote unquote attain some level of spiritual advancement, and we think, okay, this is infinite and it's all inclusive. It can't possibly get any bigger because it's already infinite. So I'm done. No, you're not. Paradoxically, even while it's already complete and infinite and all-encompassing, it keeps getting bigger and bigger, and it keeps finding more and more to incorporate. And much of what it uses for that expansion is its humanity, so that all of the parts of ourselves that we once might have considered to be unspiritual, you know, non-spiritual, gradually we discover those are all also divine. My fallibility, my stupidity, my mistakes all serve the divine. If I'm willing to open up and allow, again, Brahman to include everything. There's also the line, Brahman is the eater of everything. Brahman devours everything. So this dichotomy that you have the spiritual on one side and the human on the other side, or that I have some great attainment because I've gone beyond my humanity. Well, that dichotomy is dualistic. You know, it's not the highest summit of enlightenment. The highest summit of enlightenment is going to be fully human, fully divine. And human means human. You know, problems, with issues, with unfinished business. All of that is part of the whole thing. And that teaching, in one way or another, needs to really work its way in so that it becomes much, much more part of the understanding of what it means to be awake.
Thank you, Jerry. And it's through us modeling it. It's through us. Yeah, it's ourselves are the ones, yeah, who will change the culture, you know. Catherine.
Hello.
Hi.
So I always find myself wanting to interject Ken Wilber because of the level and extent he studied, all the different great traditions and the science. And he and Alan Combs had relative to this question, had come up with this Wilber-Combs lattice, where you could have these advanced major expansive experiences with wakefulness, but then, so it's growing up, showing up, waking up and cleaning up for the shadow work. And all four had these stages of development within them. But if you can have these amazing expansive things, but then when you return, your psychological structure for the growing up could be still in a very, not even a global kind of approach, depending on the values and the way the brain is. So you could be completely out of it. And I love the expression or the description in the Sufi traditions of that. Like, I wondered, now I'm rethinking Rumi. Where was he in growing up? But, and then the first question, my sense of what we're doing is that as people are going through this evolutionary psychology and they're waking up, however that works, you can see in the cultural sphere around how do we organize still lower level kinds of more patriarchal structures, and I sense by what you're talking about with the young folks that they're starting to want to be a more egalitarian, democratic type of structural context within the we space. And I've been doing a lot of work lately with awakened we, because my sense is, in Wilber's looking at what pops the brain into second tier, being able to hold multiple perspectives, that's still an individual movement of the spiral. And I think you and some of these other groups I've been connected with are starting to push another evolutionary shift into what does it mean to be an awakened we, where there's individuality and no boundary, and it's very safe and everything is included. But it's like where you're with a partner, or however people have experienced maybe flash moments of it where there's only one of us here. What does it mean when human consciousness, as we've moved with non-duality, moves beyond our siloed experience, where someone can be totally tripping out and another person's like, very mundane in the same room, and what happens when we start moving. So I think you're articulating and beginning to think about what does an awakened we look like, where yes, there might be people with greater skill sets, ages, whatever, but yet the wisdom still comes through, the baby in the room.
Yeah, beautiful, Catherine. You're flagging something where we're not yet as an organization.
Well, I think that's what this discussion is about, though.
It's moving there.
What does it mean to be? What does this look like to be alive in that world?
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for naming it. Super, Catherine. If you can unmute yourself there, Catherine. Catherine, can you unmute yourself?
Here we go. Yeah, so that was wonderful, Catherine. It was also kind of where I was heading. Was I heard a definition for God was they don't say God, they say God, which is a generator of diversity. And I thought, oh my God, that just does something inside of me just to hear that. A generator of diversity, and that in that diversity there is a hierarchy, And in that hierarchy, there's some place for you to be that makes you really special, but not to the place where you're practicing a superiority with that specialness. So we all have a place, but there's no higher or lower. And it's still a hierarchy. And for me, what excites me is to always find that edge that I'm trying to work. What is that little bit of darkness that I'm still hanging on to, or shadow work that makes me feel superior, or makes me feel like I'm in control, or makes me feel like, I'm special. And that is when you realize as a spiritual being that you don't need the control, you don't need to feel special. When you know that in your bones, like that you're good, that if someone came in and shot you in the head right now, it's like, oh well, on to the next thing. And we all know that if we're awake. And so what is that little bit that's always, trying to, put her hand up maybe? That could be as simple as that. That's very exciting, because to work at that place, to me, and what I think Jack is doing here, is to teach us an art form of learning, there's an art form involved in it. I don't know what it is, but I only know that I'm in the right place. And I also know that I have to be vulnerable. I have to find that place where I want to move forward, and it's scary, and I'm probably going to make a fool of myself, and I'm probably not going to do it right. But do people get who I am anyway? That even if I don't do it right, I'm going to try. And that essence that we all have is the only thing that really matters. Not that we did it right. We're going to get it right. We're probably not. This is a very big thing you're doing here, Jack, and we got to be willing to kind of be soldiers and sacrifice ourselves a little bit here to find out, okay, that's got to go. That doesn't work. A little bit more of that, a little bit less of that. So I think that's under the umbrella of hierarchy on how we're going to do that. And I'm just so, so grateful that I found my way here. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Celia.
Thanks, Jack. Hello, and hello, everyone. My name is Celia. Thanks for putting this on. Thank you so much for the topic, and everyone for your comments. I've just been reflecting on really my own journey and thinking back to sort of the beginning of what I would call, my seeking of enlightenment or spiritual perfection in a way, which I wouldn't have named it as that, but, I've been taught over the years that that's what I was going for. And at one point, hitting some kind of an enlightened state or some kind of a new awareness and preaching. And an Indigenous elder said to me after hearing me, he said, Celia, you can't be so heavenly that you're no earthly good. And, I've always held on to that because it's such a reminder to me that, I want heaven, and yet I'm trying to be of use here. And another piece was hearing a spiritual teacher in a setting where, before he even got to the mic, I was judging him. And then he got to the mic and he said, God, I'm so nervous. And I fell in love with him in that moment. It was like, oh, he has something for me. And, that all of these pieces have given me the courage when I lead retreats, one of which is called Being Enough. The first thing I say is, I'm leading this because I struggle with being enough. This is like intrinsic to my journey is, you know, validating or feeling or living from my enoughness. And I have found that the people who come to my retreats, this is what they're responding to, you know, that someone who's facilitating something that they feel like they need is aligning herself with them. And then the last thing I want to say is, you know, doing my own shadow work obviously enables me to keep doing this work. And like life teaches me, I loved Thea's story that like whatever happens, whenever I hit the enlightened state, I will get the smackdown. Like it's gonna happen. It's never ceased to happen. And you know, I get the teaching that says, back to earth, Celia, back to earth. So yeah, it's an ongoing journey, and I really appreciate the discussion. So thank you.
Thank you, Celia. Yeah, I find these experiences that you're sharing hugely enriching. And the more these types of personal challenges, struggles, how it shows up in the world, we're modeling it. We're saying it's really important that teachers do this, but we're actually modeling it here, which is beautiful. This is as good as it gets, really, you know, is that we just continue to do this. There is one question that I'd like to pop in a breakout room, but let's go to one other topic before we do that. How does personal development continue or not continue beyond the word achievement of awakening is in there, but you know, the phase of awakening, let's say, you know, how does personal development continue or not continue beyond the phase of awakening? Is it different? How it continues? Is it different post-awakening? I know I've read in many places or heard other teachers talking about it, I'm not sure which at this point, that yeah, it's much more difficult to do inner work when your lens of perception has moved to the wider viewpoint, that your humanness has reduced and the personal gain of doing personal development is gone. So then where's the motivation going to come from? And I've seen that come up a lot. But for me personally, something wants to continue to evolve. Something wants to be just the best version of Jack that I can be, you know, and that's a constant bar that keeps moving and moving. And I have a long way to go and it'll continue way after Jack pops her clogs. But, you know, like for me, the motivation changed because the personal development, pre the major shifts, personal development was stuff I had to clear in order to arrive into a stable viewpoint from what we call absolute in the non-dual sector. So like then arriving, maturing out of that to where like the evolution, life evolving, the seasons changing, that ongoing cycle of earthly wisdom, we allow it back in. And that for me is what made me want to, oh, my evolution is of the earth. I've got to honor this and upskill and keep going in and out of therapy as need arises. And let's just continue the whole thing. And I do. Rick.
Just a quick quote, one of my favorites on this topic from Saint Teresa of Avila. She said, "It appears that God himself is on the journey."
Super. Thank you. Rebecca.
Hi. So, like from my experience, I don't like view enlightenment as like a place or a thing. I think it is important to have continuous development and to also have the advice of people that are younger than you that can give you perspectives and changing ideals so that you don't get stuck in for me, the whole hierarchy is a problem. And I guess to go to some of the other questions, like I think looking inward and asking like, why did I want to be a teacher? Why do I want to share this? Is it because I want to be of service, or is it because I want to gain some sort of like attainment in a community or what have you?
Mhm. There's a rich pointer. Okay, let's take it into our hearts. Scott.
This is a near and dear question to me. And one of my inquiries is, how do gurus go wrong? And I've seen too many instances of very powerful people who have acted out of integrity. So it's been an inquiry I've had for many, many years. And one of the people that helped me with that was, as Catherine was mentioning, was Ken Wilber, who talked about the difference between growing up and waking up. And he said they are two separate processes. And I remember Maharishi said to us, you know, don't worry about therapy, don't worry about personal growth, just meditate and all the problems will go away. And after 10 years, they didn't go away. And I knew I needed to address my stuff. I became a psychotherapist. So I've been doing that for 40 years or so. So Wilber says, you know, growing up and waking up are two different processes, and you've got to attend to both of them. And to me, the problem comes when someone has some kind of spiritual development or attainment. To me, what happens is they enter into a state of perfection. There is that state of perfection that they can identify with more and more, but there's a conflation that happens between I'm in a state of perfection versus my behavior or my humanness is perfect. And that's where a lot of problems happen. You know, I know this teacher who considers himself to be an avatar. So therefore, everything I say and do is perfect. And yet he's creating incredible destruction among his community, you know, because of that attitude. And people buy into it. You know, oh, he's perfect. He's in that perfect state. So whatever my guru says is I should do and follow through with. There's one other person that has helped me in this inquiry. He's kind of a kooky guy. His name is Ramaji. He's really kooky, and I don't really agree with a lot of the stuff he talks about. But he has this scale. Take it or not, but he has this scale called LOC, levels of consciousness. And there's something in there that's actually really helpful. And he talks about there are these different stages of spiritual development. And even though when someone becomes awake in yogic terms, there's still that individuality there that's really that shadow stuff that really needs to be worked on. And he says, as you evolve more and more, that kind of gets more purified and, you know, burned up. But at the beginning stages, middle stages, you've got to keep working on your shadow stuff. Otherwise, we've just seen too many instances of gurus who have a lot of power, clearly a lot of power, and probably are, I think, awakened, but they act in a way, because they haven't dealt with their humanness, they act in a way that are destructive or out of integrity. So,
yep.
Yeah, that's my speech. Thanks for listening.
Totally with you. Yeah, we need more of those messages to go out there. Stick it on social media and all that, you know, just put these ideas out there. Mariana.
Hi, everybody. I'm mostly chiming in just because I really want to express my alliance with Jack and Rick and what ASI is doing. I don't need my opinion to be heard that much in this conversation, and I came in late and I'm leaving early, but a few things that pop up for me is some of you might know me, not others not, but I spent probably 15 years just ending up researching and writing into these exact questions. So and a lot of it's in a confidential storehouse because I'm a psychotherapist and I've been the therapist to so many teachers and scandals and all that. But it's like, I read that question and it's like instantly, I'm like, how can it not continue? How could human development, or whatever how it goes, personal development, how could it not continue? It's like, that's just where I sit after taking in, 25 years of spiritual, I don't even know the word, dismemberment, decay, problems, holding people's confidences, falling again and again, myself again and again. So that was one piece. Then it goes, I really like that point of Thea, who I've never seen until today, saying, well, in Islamic tradition, this isn't really a thing. And even though I largely practice in the yogic tradition, I practice Judaism as well. And it's another example when I read Thea's comment, like that wouldn't even be a thing in Judaism. I don't even think it would be a thing for the great mystics. It's just not a thing, because that religion focuses, it's very earth-based and about, it fails, especially in Orthodoxy, but it's so much built. We spend less time in transcendence and more about morality and ethics and service and seasons, and so it doesn't do it perfectly. But I just, which kind of brings me to a point that I think might be useful for ASI. It seems, I've talked to Jack about this before, I'm sure, and Rick, but that it's because of where it's came from, it has drawn many people who've been in, like, what's the contemporary non-dual tradition in some way or another, versions of that, because that's been a lot of the membership. I know that's far beyond that. But I wanted to just bring that because it connects Thea's point that she put in the chat. And I believe, and I think Jack, Rick, whoever ASI is, all of us would benefit from striving to include more religious perspectives from different religions, attract people from more of a diverse spiritual traditions. I think it would round out the picture, and I think there'd be so much resonance, like both ways, in and out. And two more. One is Kimberly, right, who's a big part of this now. Kimberly, she's not here today, but we kind of grown up together for the last 25 years in parallel tracks. And so watching her be a spiritual teacher and watching the whole scandal that happened around her teacher and being the therapist that was super involved in it, and then having her leave that and do her doctorate in human development is, yet another beautiful ASI example of, that speaks to this point. Yeah, and I'm gonna have to leave to take care of my sick boy, but I'll hang out as many minutes more as possible. But I really just wanted to say, I'm with you all. I wish and hope I get to know more of you and show up more and more over time and be as useful as I can.
Thank you, Mariana. Super. Lots of interesting points there. Just so that you all know, is like there's currently 18 of us who volunteer our time to the ASI in small groups. There's like a fundraising team, and there's somebody looking at expanding the code of ethics, so it has a more educational thing. There's 18 of us. That's a lot of small teams. So it's a few of us might be the public face, but there's quite a team of people who are committed to doing this work. Thank you, Mariana. Keith.
Hi, yeah. Apologies for arriving late, so if there's anything being repeated here, forgive me. I'm a therapist as well. I'm working with addiction and people on the 12-step program. So that's quite interesting. For me, it's almost like where the rubber meets the road. So given what they themselves are working through and how they come to sessions, and it's really interesting to see the humanness and the humans, the spirit in human form, and all its frailties and its ways of coping. So therefore, the humanness for me is utterly essential, that we're in some ways asking a lot of the time, to my ears, not to be human, to be something superhuman, to be above human. You leave your humanness, and to me, it's utterly ridiculous that we're in human form, we will bring everything the humans bring to this. And it is the joining really of the two. And I see it every single day. And maybe a second point is that I see for years many leaders and gurus not embracing that at all. There's some way to be, there's a path that has to be adhered to, and this is it. And I completely understand where they're coming from, but for example, I see people who struggle with meditation. And as a psychologist, for me, you really open up the space for whatever appears. The blank canvas is beautiful. Just let's see what appears in this space. And this is what the session hopefully is around and about. And lo and behold, very often trauma can fill the space. And then those poor people are told, you're not doing it right, you know, you're doing it wrong. There's a sense of failure. So for me, as I say, I'm very much where the rubber meets the road and dealing with the consequences of a lot of what is going on, and a lot of blinkered completely without for me, there's a whole embracing needs to be done here. Re-humanness, the spiritual path. And yeah, that's probably all I have to say. Thank you.
Super, Keith. Yeah, thank you. And if I overlap some of what you said with some of what Mariana said, maybe it's something that the ASI could do is to put together a small team who would look at that to see how can that be that idea that, hey, it's you know, it's healthier to embrace your humanness and your divinity, and this is what it looks like, and this is what your supports might look like, and maybe there's, you know, and what Mariana said about different traditions having names for different states, so that information come into the non-lineage traditions, you know.
Because because people will end up having to deal with this often on their own.
Yes.
And there's so much shaming, and there's so much sense of failure, and there's so much people dealing with it on their own.
Yes.
That yeah, as you say, absolutely, something's really needed.
Something's needed.
This is wonderful. This is beautiful. This is the way it should be. You're not alone. That's what I'm trying to say. There are so many people saying the same thing to me.
Yeah.
All thinking they're on their own.
Yeah. So, you know, if something wants to happen, Keith, around like heading up a small group of like, how do we get this message out there? Then go for it and reach out to us. But, you know, or solo, I don't mind. You know, it's like, it's just about doing what we can to serve and to serve better, you know, to serve our colleagues as well as ourselves, as well as the generations after us, so that the next round of spiritual leaders when we're gone have a new normal, you know, of where their humanness is integrated, you know.
Yeah, it would be wonderful to do that. Thank you.
Yeah. Hayat and Jerry, and then I'm just going to go into a very small, short breakout room. Hayat?
Yes, thank you, Jack. Sorry, just trying to figure out if my camera is showing.
No, but it's okay. We can hear you.
Okay, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak. I'm here. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm here to represent the students. I can't claim any teacher role or anything like that. I was a student of Jack since 2016 up until she took off the teacher hat back in 2023. And I'm here because, first of all, I was looking for maybe to represent the students in here and say that, you know, first of all, my heart is beating very fast. I feel nervous to speak, just to name and acknowledge that. and perhaps I would love my camera to be turned on, and I don't want to be incognito, you know, I don't mean that. And I intend to show up fully and not hide, but my camera is sincerely not turning on. Anyhow, I'm here just to say that as an Arab woman, Arab descendant from Muslim culture woman, I don't feel safe and in the world, in my human body, in my human in the phenomenal realm, and perhaps that's why my heart is beating very fast when I'm, you know, in front of this group to speak something really a peaceful message, which is as a spiritual student, I haven't found myself represented the past 4 or 5 months, and I didn't know where to turn for spiritual wisdom and guidance. And so I have had to lean on, and maybe it's not a bad thing, maybe it's a good thing. I've had to lean on the tools and the spiritual skills that I have cultivated throughout my journey on the path for the past 8 years, with Jack's guidance, as well as the different elements of spirituality that I've, you know, learned or went through. So maybe I just wanted to highlight that, you know, I don't, to answer the question, I don't believe there's a specific phase of awakening. I believe it's a continuous process, and I have felt a continuous expansion in my awakening as I have attended to my human aspect and acknowledged its vulnerabilities and its needs for growth and for connection.
Thank you, Hayat. Thank you for coming forward and taking on that challenge of having your voice heard.
Thank you.
Is it a quickie, Jerry? Because I want to break into a group.
Yeah, I'll do it as quickly as I can. I think that possibly a key to this, the question, you know, how can we continue to develop our humanity after awakening, is motivation and intention. It's very common that people start with the intention of escaping their humanity. And then when they get into some awakening, then they try to shut off their humanity and use the awakening as a block to keep it out. And that's based on a false assumption, obviously. And, you know, eventually they're going to be kind of forced to re-examine their humanity. And then also, it requires attention, you know, intention and attention. And for that, I think it's important to do exactly what we're doing and just really keep emphasizing that the unfoldment and the deepening and the connecting of our humanity is part and parcel of waking up, rather than seeing them as, you know, kind of opposing each other.
Super. Yeah. Thank you, Jerry. Yeah. Yeah. Great points there. Yeah. I'm going to scoot on, David, if it can be a quickie.
Yeah, I think I see this a little bit different than the conversation so far. So I think in the first thing for me that happens in awakening is a lot more quiet. One's not engaged in futures and worries about a lot of things that don't exist. A tremendous amount of chatter doesn't exist anymore. And all of those things are what disembodies everybody, basically. So what I also notice is that as you kind of come out of a large awakening, Lesha Vidya starts showing up, the faint remains, and those faint remains become very, very obvious. They become hyper obvious because it's not drowned out in the typical noise that you used to possess as personality. And then the other thing is that there's like a discussion here, almost like spirituality is one thing, and then we have to come back to embodiment. I don't look at it as that way. I think of us as we are embodiment, and we're and practice is trying to get us out of the noise that that has us mesmerized in a trance of future times, past times, worries, politics, our favorite buzzwords, our favorite channels of thought, our favorite mind loops. Upon awakening, so much of that's gone. And then as Leishavidya starts coming back, you can actually feel yourself where you're still grasped. And it's very obvious, and it's not lost in the noise anymore. So, you know, on a typical day for a typical person lost in the noise, they can be jarring, they can be really rude, they can be so many things, and it's lost in all the noise. And they know they've got a problem, but they got so many problems. And then when all of a sudden most of that's silenced, then a lot of the real problems you have become extremely obvious, and you can't hide from them. I mean, then again, humans can find a way to hide in just about anything, and so that's also some of the topic.
We can indeed. Yeah. Thank you, David. Thank you. Just a little technical thing. Renata, 8 minutes, if you can create breakout rooms for 8 minutes, that would be really great. Just as Renata's preparing there for the technical thing, kind of combining Jerry and David in my head, where it goes is like, you know, if there is a blind spot, it might still be blind post these shifts that happen to our consciousness. There's no guarantee that they'll become blatantly obvious. The ones at the surface will, but what's in the unconscious is unconscious still, you know. And I think, you know, when, you know, a lot of us were drawn to spirituality because of human suffering. And then if we shift into these other levels of consciousness, we have to go back and look at the suffering. But for some, it's actually just too painful, because that's what motivated their spiritual path in the first place. So there's some kind of denial or it's just too painful. And so grasping, as David said, grasping to the other state and to the other value system that comes with the wider expansive view can mean like, hey, this part that you were running from before you discovered spirituality, it's still there, and it's going to come out, and it's going to lead to misuse of power at a minimum, you know. So we have to say yes to all of it, don't we? You know, we're going to break just for 8 minutes. And the reason I think this is important is that I'd like to give us all an experience of dialing into a personal need right now, because that inner awareness of our own human needs is what we're talking about. So it's about us doing it. We have to be the change. And so for these 8 minutes, I'm going to put you into small groups. I hope you choose to participate. To look at what personal need did I respond to today in coming to this webinar. So I'm participating in an event that the ASI put on in response to what personal need did I have. So I'd like you to dial in and identify the personal need that drove you to, you know, an hour and 20 minutes ago to say yes to this and to dedicate some time. What was the personal need, and can you name that? Because that's really the practice. You know, do I know what my personal needs are that are making me decide things? And if our personal needs have a greater microphone, then we can be more accountable. We can, you know, we'll be more personally responsible. Welcome back. I've got 1 minute. We don't have time to share feedback from that process, but I hope that the process was an indicator of what it feels like in a practical way to stay connected to your humanness and to identify your needs and to know the connection between your inner need and your outside behavior, because that's it in practice. That's what we're talking about. And that's it in practice. So I couldn't resist but to give us an example of, like, let's take it from these ideas into what each of us needs to do. So that was the purpose of that exercise. I'd like to tell you that about the first course that we're putting on. Well, we were involved in creating. For several years, I've been working with the Right Use of Power Institute around understanding power and power dynamics. And so for about the last 5 or 6 months, we've been engaged in creating a course around the right use of power for spiritual leadership. And it's now available. It's a one-off in that it's specifically for anybody connected or aligned with the ASI. You can be a spiritual leader, a student, an interested party, but the course it's good. It's a really good course. That's been my personal experience of it, and now it's been kind of informed by the culture that we're talking about today. So I'm going to put a link into the chat box directly to it. If you are a member of the ASI, you'll get $100 off. ASI 100 is the code. ASI 100. We can't do anything about the price. We've got no cheap places. We can't do scholarships. All of that is on the Right Use of Power Institute, but they're just doing this one with us because it's such an important topic. It starts on the 1st of April, so it means signing up in March. It's for 3 months. It's a hybrid course. So like there's 2 videos and then there's an integration live session, 2 videos, integration live session. It goes on like that for 12 weeks. Yeah, I would strongly recommend this course with the Right Use of Power, but off you go. Have a look anyway and see if there's a pull to it. I want to thank you all for coming today. It's just beautiful to feel a part of a community. I love it. And I hope that kind of spreads out and that you guys resonate with that too. Thank you for your time. Thank you for wanting the world to be a better place and for us to be better people within it. And so hopefully see you at the next one. The blurb about it is on the upcoming events at the bottom of our homepage, and you can register right now for the next one, or at least save the date. With much love, thank you all. Catch you downriver.